In the last lesson, we learned about the circulatory system and about the structure of the heart. We learned that the heart has two different sides separated by a thick wall of tissue called the septum. The left side of the heart is responsible for pumping oxygen-rich blood, while the right side of the heart is responsible for pumping oxygen-poor blood. We also learned that there were four chambers. We have a left atrium, a left ventricle, a right atrium, and a right ventricle. Now let's take a closer look at the pattern of blood flow throughout the heart, lungs, and to the rest of the body. How the heart works. The heart beats in two main phases. First, it relaxes, filling with blood, and then it contracts, pumping blood forward along the circulatory system. During relaxation, the left and the right atria open up, allowing blood to flow in. The atria contract, pumping blood into the ventricles, first passing through valves. Blood is now in each ventricle. The ventricles contract, pumping blood into arteries. At the same time, the valve between the ventricle and the atria close, preventing blood from flowing backwards into the atria. Now, let's look at ventricles and valves. The left ventricle is responsible for pumping blood throughout the body. The right ventricle is responsible for pumping blood to the lungs for gas exchange. Oxygen diffuses into the blood and CO2 diffuses out. Notice in the diagram, the walls of the ventricles are thicker than that of the atria. This is because the ventricles must be stronger pumps, as they are responsible for pumping blood either to the lungs or throughout the body. So they have thicker muscular walls, which allows them to generate enough force for blood to be pumped either to the lungs or throughout the whole body. Also in the diagram, notice that there are four valves, one in each side of the heart, separating the atria and the ventricles, and also one separating the ventricles and each artery. So that'll be the aortic valve and the pulmonary valve. The valves open so that blood can pass through and move on into the next step in the circulatory system. They can also close so that blood does not flow backwards. Regulation of the heartbeat. The beating of our hearts is regulated by a group of cells called the pacemaker. Ever wonder why your heart beats faster during exercise? The pacemaker receives messages from the body about oxygen requirements. When we are moving around and exercising, our cells need more oxygen compared to our oxygen needs at rest. The pacemaker cells receives the messages to increase oxygen supply to our cells, causing our heart to speed up and supplying more blood that carries oxygen throughout our body. If your pacemaker becomes damaged as a result of, say, injury or disease, an artificial pacemaker can be implanted under the skin near your heart. It's battery operated and has wires connecting to the heart. The artificial pacemaker creates electrical impulses that travel from the device to your heart, signaling it to beat. So after the blood leaves the heart, it goes throughout the rest of the body, and it flows throughout the rest of the body in blood vessels. And there are three different kinds of blood vessels. We have arteries, which carry oxygen-rich blood away from the heart, delivering oxygen to the body. From the arteries, blood flows into smaller vessels called capillaries. This is the site of exchange between the blood and body cells. From capillaries, oxygen-poor blood flows into the veins and back to the heart. And notice, in most diagrams and pictures of hearts, the artery is usually depicted in red, indicating that the blood is rich in oxygen, and the vein is depicted in blue, indicating the blood lacks oxygen. However, if we scroll up back to our diagram of the heart, the pulmonary valve leads also into an aorta. This aorta carries blood leaving the heart to the lungs. This blood happens to be oxygen poor, though, because this blood is being sent to the lungs in order to oxygenate and get rid of carbon dioxide. So that's one exception. However, most arteries are going to be carrying oxygen-rich blood from the heart to the body. The pattern of blood flow in humans occurs in two loops. In the first loop, oxygen-poor blood enters the right side of the heart and is pumped through the pulmonary arteries to the lungs. Capillary beds in the lungs exchange oxygen for carbon dioxide. Blood leaving the lungs is now low in carbon dioxide and high in oxygen content. Blood then travels from the lungs into the veins, entering the left side of the heart. This oxygenated blood leaves the left side of the heart and is pumped throughout the body. So now that we know there are two loops that are completed, let's take a closer look at loop 1, to the lungs and back. When blood from the body flows into the right atrium, it contains little oxygen and a lot of carbon dioxide. The right atrium contracts, pushing blood through the valve into the right ventricle. The ventricle then contracts and pumps oxygen-poor blood into the atria that lead to the lungs. In the lungs, blood flows through capillaries that are in contact with the air in our lungs that we have inhaled. Oxygen diffuses from the air and into the lungs, while carbon dioxide diffuses out of the blood and into the lungs. As blood leaves the lungs, it is now rich in oxygen. This blood flows into veins leading to the left side of the heart. The oxygenated blood is now ready for the second loop. Loop 2, to the body and back. In the second loop, oxygen-rich blood circulates between the heart and the rest of the body. Oxygen-rich blood leaving the lungs enters the left atrium and flows into the left ventricle. From the left ventricle, blood flows through the aorta, the largest artery in the body. Remember, arteries carry blood away from the heart. Blood then flows through a branching network of arteries throughout the body from head to toe. Finally, reaching capillaries, which is the site of gas exchange, blood diffuses from the blood into the cell. This is also where waste products, such as carbon dioxide, diffuses out of the cell and into the blood. Blood, rich in carbon dioxide and low in oxygen, now flows through veins leading to the right atrium, starting the first loop again. And that's how blood circulates throughout our body. Now, one question I'll leave you with to think about is, why do we need this double circulation pattern? Is our heart strong enough to pump blood all the way from our lungs to the body and then back to the heart and lungs? Or are we too large? Therefore, we have to pump blood to our lungs to be oxygenated and back to the heart in order to generate enough force to be pumped throughout the rest of our bodies.